This is Truth Between Lines. I'm sitting here with Josh Gannier. He is from Mission Phoenix. We're going to hear all about how he's helping returning soldiers. So, Josh, welcome to the show. I'm very glad you are here in this fantastic office. But
Thank you.
Tell us more about yourself, Mission Phoenix, what's going on, and what you represent.
Sure. So, Mission Phoenix, we're a 501c3. We're a charity organization. And our main focus is work with veterans that struggle with post-traumatic stress. Our goal is to not just bring awareness to it, but to actually find the root causes of their issues and solve those issues before it becomes a crisis situation.
Nice. Okay. And how'd you get into this? Tell us about yourself then, too.
So I'm an entrepreneur by trade and never had any dreams. You know, when you grow up as a child, you don't think one day I'm going to run a nonprofit. That's not your main goal. But in 2017, my father, who was a Marine, he struggled with post-traumatic stress. And it turned into a situation where ultimately it was a suicide by cop incident. May 23rd, 2017, my father, who was a Marine, served between 60 and 65, struggled with post-traumatic stress. He had some complications with the VA, with some of the medications that they were sending them, connections with the VA, not being able to get to Johnson City, certain things. So ultimately the medication that they gave him put him in a situation where he ultimately turned into a suicide by cop incident. Law enforcement was called out because he was acting erratically, and it ended up costing him his life. Because of that, I had looked into the situation of what happened to my dad, what the situation that he was put in, the causes, the effects, all these different scenarios, and try to think, how can we fix this? One of the pivotal decision-making things for me in my life was Mother's Day in 2017 was the last conversation I had with my dad. And he had sitting around him just paperwork talking about 22 veterans a day that commit suicide.
22 veterans a day. Okay.
22 veterans a day. And that's actually a number from 2013. Yeah. And we can talk into the real numbers, but it's more like 44 to 46 a day now. As far as accurate numbers. And that doesn't include drug overdose, alcohol, or suicide by cop instances.
Okay.
But he was explaining this to me, and I didn't even care. I didn't sit down. I didn't pay attention to it. I told him, don't worry about it, Dad. The VA will take care of it. Mm-hmm. The last thing my father said to me before I walked out the door, he said, Josh, I turned around, he pointed at me, he said, someone's going to fix this. And that became...
You talk about you get emotional. I'm getting emotional on this thing. I mean, geez. Yeah, that's rough. Wow. Okay. So you're seeing this for the first time and everything's happening to you. And you don't know it, but you see the repercussions now. What could you help? What could people do to notify that or recognize what's happening?
You know, looking back, and one of the things that Mission Phoenix tried to do is we try to educate people. Okay. Education is power. Yeah. If I knew back then what I know now about post-traumatic stress, I would have seen all the signs. In fact, I replay all the signs in my head from childhood all the way up. And we ignored it because we didn't understand it. And I think that's what happens in a lot of homes is people don't understand what's happening to their family. You know, the situation with my dad, even after that, 9 days later, my dad took his life. 9 days. And that mantra sat in my mind for years, someone's going to fix this. And that's what our main goal is. So when we look at every aspect, you know, you take most nonprofits and they're trying to bring awareness. They're trying to do something. They're bringing people together. We're doing that too, but our main focus for everything is let's find what the problem is in the situation. Let's go back to the origin and fix it before it becomes a critical issue or cost someone their life.
Yeah. Good advice. Yeah, my grandfather served in the Korean War. And it's interesting. Of course, I was younger back back in those days before he passed away. And he would never talk about the war or anything else he witnessed, anything else with me. And again, I was even when I was in my early 20s, he would never really talk to me about it. But we would go to VFW a lot, the Veteran Forest War, the bar, and everything else, and that's where he hung out. And I tell you right now, he would tell stories about war to all the other people that were in that room, and I would listen to them, but nonchalantly. And it's like, I wish I would have paid. Number one, I wish I would have paid more attention to that. But the fact that he wouldn't tell me anything at all, but he'd spread the word to some stranger out there, and I thought that was interesting. The fact that he's okay to open up to other people, but he couldn't open up to his family, and I think that was a hard thing for him to do overall. Yeah. And I feel that your dad was maybe the same way.
Yeah, veterans. There's a huge disconnect between a civilian and a veteran in understanding. So even when a veteran, because our brain is developed till we're 27. Well, if you take anyone that's gone into the military, they're usually 17, 18, 19 years old. And then if they stay in for the first 4 years or so, that's their pivotal time of training their mind and their body for the rest of their life. So when they come out of the military, they have certain statutes, they have certain things that they do that will never change. Civilians will never understand that. So there's that disconnect. So when you have someone that has been in battle or been in combat, they're not going to sit down with a civilian, because a civilian will never comprehend the sounds, the noises, the smells, all the things about the military that only military understand. And a lot of times they feel it is disrespectful even for a citizen to say, tell me all about this, because they don't want to rehash it with somebody that cannot relate to it or feel the same things that they feel. So yeah, there's a huge barrier. In fact, my dad, we didn't know any of his tours. We didn't know where he was at. We just knew he was in the Marines. That's all we knew. We had some pictures of it, of him in the Marines. Nothing was spoken of. And turned out he was in the Cuban crisis. He was in the Panama riots. So the battles that were the bloody battles. And he carried that with him until the day that he died. And we didn't find out till we saw his documents, his papers, what his tours actually were. And then everything in our life started to make sense,
We talk about the transition too from military life to civilian life, and I with any subject we do, anything you can learn about, there's so much other stuff. Once you start investigating and talking to people, reading articles and watching videos, you start realizing there's a whole different world. So talk about the transition. And one thing I looked up was Sebastian Junger. He did a thing, a TED Talk, and we went through the whole thing. I'm watching it, and I was intrigued by his talk. So talk about that transition that you kind of mentioned briefly, but as far as you're in a military situation and then you come home.
So if you think about what the military does and how they train, one of the biggest things is that brotherhood. They have a bond. So when you go into battle, you have to 100% trust the guy behind you. You have to be able to have that bond. When you go down, you know that person is going to be right there behind you. Well, it's a high stress situation. It's always moving. It's always adrenaline pumping every single day when you're out in war. Well, then you come home and you're sitting in traffic, and the guy next to you is laying on his horn, and they're stressed because they're not getting to work in time. Right. And in their mind, or their mindset is that military wants to have that. Number one, they have to have the brotherhood, right? They have to have that bond, which they don't find, and then they have to have that adrenaline as well. So they almost feel like they're robbed of what their body is craving every single day. That gives a disconnect with how they respond, how they act, their self-worth, all these different things, because their body is craving all of that. So that whole brotherhood that veterans crave, or that they had, when they come to civilian life, they can't find it. We try to build that up. We do events and stuff like that. But really what we try to do is connect them, not just with other men and women in the military, but also with civilians, because what we're finding now is civilians, although we cannot relate. I am not a veteran, 100% not a veteran, but I can talk to a veteran. And there's a way of talking or conversing with them where they understand that you will never know what they went through, but you can at least be there to help comfort them through what they went through. So that brotherhood is absolutely key. But and you see, even in society, we're relational people. Yeah. So you take things like 9/11, Katrina, these catastrophic events where all of a sudden it doesn't matter your race, your color, your what kind of political beliefs you have. Everybody comes together to help humanity, and that's how our human nature is, to help others. That is something that is secondary for civilians, but it's primary for military. And that's where I think there's the civilian sector kind of gets it wrong, because we don't have that brotherhood. We don't have that trust in the next person like the military has with their brothers.
Yeah, that's a really good point overall. I mean, the catastrophe, as bad as it is, some good can possibly have out of it, if you can look at it that way. One thing I was talking to my Marine friend, he you mentioned other wars too, as well, as far as soldiers returning home and that kind of thing. And of course, back in the day, in which isn't even that far off, other foreign wars, they'd have 2 months on a ship together, and there'd be thousands of soldiers packed on, they're 6 to a bunk and that kind of thing on these ships coming back, and they had basically 2 months to kind of talk and let it go. Now you finish your tour, whatever you're doing, and within maybe 24 hours, you're back home at JFK or some other airport landing, and your family's picking you up, and it's like you don't have that transition moment of let's let it all out, let's talk to our fellow soldiers, our fellow everything, and it's just like, here, boom, there it is. Hey, Starbucks is down the road. You want to get a coffee on the way home? And you're like, coffee?
Yeah.
I was drinking coffee out of a boot through a sock. Now I'm looking at a latte. So
right.
That whole mentality of coming home, it's got to be tough for people.
It is, and we've got our entire board members are all veterans, and I have one of the veterans that was telling me one time, because I like to feed off of their knowledge. What is it like? And he said the most dangerous point for a veteran, or for anybody in the military, active military, not veterans, but active military, the most dangerous point is the day before you're going home.
The day before
because what happens in a veteran's mind, so they're set at war, they're set on their objective, they're set on everything, but the day before they have to try to change their whole personality, the way they are. Then now they have to become not the warrior, but the husband or the wife. So they begin to let their guard down the day before they come home. And he said that's the most dangerous point in anybody that's in active military, is right before they come home, because they feel like if they come home in the state that they're in, their family won't understand them. So they have to try to change, and that becomes vital. But when you look at prior wars, World War II, Vietnam, all that stuff, we didn't have social media, right?
Yeah.
That's a big thing, I think, that is pivotal to the damage that happens to our veterans is social media. But back then, they knew they were coming home to a wife. They knew they were coming home to a husband. They knew that there was structure when they came home. So there was that stability that they were looking forward to. Fast forward to now, where the divorce rate is almost at 50%. The statistics for a veteran that has gone through combat is when they come home, because of their struggles, within the first 6 months, almost half of them end in divorce.
6 months. Huh?
So if you take that percentage of those veterans that now are divorced, now they have alimony, now they have child support. Well, now they can't find a job because they come home with post-traumatic stress. Yeah. So they can't find a job, they have alimony, they have child support, their life is falling apart. This is where our homeless veteran community comes in. This is why it's so high, because we're literally causing the damage in our own society by not setting up the structure in our homes properly, not trying to keep the core of a family together. Instead, it's so easy to everybody's just giving up. And when we give up on our families, we're literally giving up on our veterans, and that's what's really causing the biggest thing. Then you take social media, nobody puts their bad on social media. Yeah, like everything is happy. I have the best life. So your battle buddy that went through exactly the same thing you went through on Facebook is literally saying how great his life is. Yeah. Well, what does that do to the other veteran who's saying my life is terrible? That causes such a disconnect and really so much lack of hope, because everybody else is doing so good. And we know nobody is. Everybody's struggling. Right. But social media, I think, has been the biggest downfall and the biggest catalyst for raising that number of veteran suicides.
And you didn't get that, before 10 years ago, possibly with social media. you got a letter in the mail, a handwritten letter, maybe typed, and it was talking about the farm and what happens and what's going on. But it was still kind of the good things, but it was only about what you want to know and about your family per se. Social media now is like you're hitting all this stuff, political, and just everything's been bombarded on you. So not only are you risking your life and doing your job overseas away from your family, now you're hearing about all this political stuff and just the world itself and how great somebody's meal is and what their cat did and all those things. Yeah. It's just it's a different mindset, I can imagine, being over there. Wow.
Yeah. Absolutely. And you try to detox them when they come home. And what we try to do, we call it re-enlisting into civilian life. You figure 17 to 19 years old, whenever they go in, they have boot camp. Well, boot camp lasts weeks. It's training, it's physical, mental, emotional training. But then when you get out, it's like, okay, go have a family now, go get a job, go and there's no re-enlistment into civilian life. There's no training on how to listen to your boss who's 5 years younger than you and has never led any men into battle to tell you how to do your job. And when you look at our veterans are some of the greatest leaders of our country, but they're the ones that get a second spot. They don't get the first place. They don't have the resume when they come out, so they get to start. I had a Navy SEAL guy I had met we had coffee one day, and he was telling me how he went through, it's called a bridge program. And you basically go through this program towards the end of your military career, and it kind of gives you a career type start. Good. This gentleman had trained Navy SEALs. He had gone into battle. He showed me his paperwork. He showed me his documents on his training alone. And as an entrepreneur, I'm looking at this thinking, this guy should run my company. Sure. So I asked him, I said, so what are you doing now? He says, well, I got a job at this warehouse, and I'm the janitor. I clean it out. Here's a guy who literally went into battle, led men. His resume, he's probably one of the strongest leaders I've seen on paper, and he's pushing a broom around. What do you think that does to the veteran's psyche alone, that their self-worth is gone? So we're doing a huge disjustice in the veteran community just by not paying attention to who they are, what they can do, and that's what, again, another catalyst that puts them into that depression state. And
do you ever see any movies that are real life as well? I mean, I'm thinking Rambo, talking about what you just said. When there's a big moment in that thing where he's obviously frustrated, he's yelling, but he's like, I was driving multi-million-dollar tanks overseas, and now I can't rent a car here in America. I'm just thinking about that. Like American Sniper was another good one, I thought. So do they talk about movies portraying real life? Do you hear that?
Yeah, there's a few of them, because we talk through things, and I do a lot of research. I've got over 6,500 hours of just research and development on post-traumatic stress, what it is and how it works. And one of the things that I do, which may sound like it's a leisure thing, but it's not, is watching some military-style movies. Yeah. And there's a few of them out there, and there's one, and I wish I could remember what the name of it was. I know Jake Gyllenhaal's in it, and the guy that plays Spider-Man, I don't remember what his name was. Tobey Maguire.
There's people at home right now screaming right now.
Yeah, sorry. It's two brothers, and one has post-traumatic stress. And it's probably the closest portrayal of post-traumatic stress that's out there. Because it really shows the actual mental conflict. And if you understand post-traumatic stress and what it does to the brain, because, we all go through trauma. Like we get into a car accident, something happens, and we say things like, we had an out-of-body experience, or it felt like I wasn't there, it felt like a dream when it happened. I don't remember it, it's all a blur. When that happens is we have two sides of our brain, which one's reality, one's fiction, and when they crisscross each other, that gives us that euphoric effect of being an out-of-body experience. What they have discovered in the last probably 5 years is when something is a moral conflict, meaning as a human being, we do something that we should not do as a human being. Take someone's life, do something tragic to somebody else that is permanent and effective. When we do something like that in a high adrenaline situation, those neurons still crisscross, except now they actually bore a hole. And it causes a channel inside the brain. And so when a veteran has what's called a trigger, maybe be the sound, a smell, a flashing light, something, those neurons crisscross, and immediately that veteran goes back to that situation. So it's almost like a hallucination state, but yet they see reality. So it's an in-between part of it. And you really can't get an understanding, but I think that movie itself really speaks to what a veteran goes through, where it literally, something triggers and you're just not there. I know in the situation with my dad, we did a TV interview with my mom. It was the first time my mom really talked about a lot of it, but she even said it wasn't her husband. He was talking about the war. He was, calling his battle buddies names out that have been gone for decades. So he thinks he's there in the situation, but he still sees law enforcement standing in front of him. He just doesn't understand what's going on. And I think that happens in a lot of our veteran situations, is that they don't. So when you look at some of these movies, a lot of them are dramatized, a lot of them are sensationalized, but there are a few. I think when you look at military or actual war, 13 Hours is a great perspective. Jarhead, if that's the one with Tobey Maguire and Jake Gyllenhaal.
Well, I'll put that in the comment. I'll figure that out.
We'll figure it out.
We'll do it.
I'm going to
Soon
go watch
we
it
go
tonight.
off, we'll be like, I missed the whole thing. But we'll put it
that really gives that perspective too. And one thing that we want to do, even as a nonprofit, is educate the community, educate the families to say, this is what it looks like. When you're looking at this situation, this is what it looks like, and this is how you can de-escalate the situation. Because we tend as human beings, or even law enforcement, we'll talk about law enforcement in a second, but law enforcement is an aggression, meaning they have to protect themselves. Well, their aggression or their authority figure that comes up to a veteran that is having a PTSD episode, they're also an authority. So then you have two conflicts coming together. So what we actually try to do is teach law enforcement to say, let's take a back seat for 2 minutes and let's let them have their space, and then let's try to talk them down so they know where they are. Because aggression is going to meet aggression every single time. So
talk about the symbol in that aspect of it.
So the symbol, which is on here, this is the Invictus Symbol. The Invictus Symbol is, and actually we have it printed on hats. And the Invictus Symbol, it was a trademark symbol that was designed by veterans. So about 8 years ago, I got an idea. One of the problems that I had with my dad, my dad's situation, was law enforcement had no idea that they were going to be dealing with a veteran with PTSD. But law enforcement, if they go up to a vehicle and they see a puzzle piece on a back window, that puzzle piece stands for autism. Well, law enforcement has in their training manuals a different protocol on how to approach that vehicle. You're not going to shine a flashlight in the kid's face in the back seat. You're not going to raise your voice. There's certain things that they won't do. So about 8 years ago, I'm thinking to myself, what would have helped my dad if they would have known? Went through that whole process, and I brought it to the attention of the veteran community. At the time, I had about 200 veterans that I was kind of in my think tank. And I brought it to their attention. Well, they had we came up with different symbols. Ultimately, they wanted the semicolon as their symbol. The semicolon is a symbol that is nationally known as the anti-suicide symbol. And the reason is that if you look at a semicolon, or what the purpose of it is, you can write a sentence and end it with a period. Or you can put a semicolon and continue your sentence. So it's kind of that continuation of your life. So they embraced the semicolon, and I told them, I said, we can't trademark a semicolon. It's part of the English language.
Makes sense.
So one night I threw a star on it, almost as a joke.
Really? Wow.
And I put it out to them, and immediately they embraced it. They said, this is what we want for our symbol. So we came up with the Invictus Symbol. It is trademarked specifically because this symbol by itself, a solo symbol, can only be worn by a veteran. It cannot be worn by a civilian. It's illegal to wear it as a civilian. And we actually designed an awareness hat as well, because a lot of people want to show support. So this is known as the awareness symbol, which can be worn by anybody. And any of the proceeds from all this goes right back into the Invictus Initiative, which is our program that we've developed. The symbol by itself is an awareness. It's not a shameful symbol. It's a symbol to show, hey, I've gone through a lot. Veterans are embracing it. They want people to understand, because if imagine the entire community understood when they see this symbol what that person has gone through, the respect level for them will go up. People will pay more attention to them when they're in a crisis situation. People will learn to not escalate the situation. So we developed the symbol first, and I'll tell you about why it's going to be important. Is in 2022, I got a message. Now I've been counseling veterans across the country, mainly on TikTok. So we had a huge following on TikTok. We do live counseling on TikTok, and but locally we started getting more local. I get a message from a law enforcement officer, and he says, I have someone that needs to talk to a counselor. Do you have a counselor available? And I said, I don't, but I'll work with him. He said, no, I think you need to get somebody else to do this one. And I said, no. I said, I'm the only one that's available. Just give him my number. I'll gladly talk to him. And they said, well, he's one of the officers that was there the day your dad was killed. So I thought, I've been teaching, or I've been trying to talk to veterans about reconciliation, forgiveness, moving forward past your pain. And I thought, okay, This is my chance to practice what I preach. So I agreed, and it took about 3 months for him to actually want to meet. We met. We talked for about 3 hours in Dunkin' Donuts, because that's my favorite coffee. No plug there. But we talked for about we talked for about 3 hours, and then I got to hug on him and forgive him and just tell him that it's going to be okay. Here's a guy that was on the force for 3 months. He had the training, but the training, and he did everything that he was trained to do exactly how he was trained to do it. And we both sat there, and I told him about my dad. And I said, you know, the last thing that my father said was, someone's going to fix it. And I said, could you imagine if one day you and I fix this? And he said, I want to do that. I don't mean to get emotional, but so then we began working on law enforcement training. It was in 2023. We actually did our first training class in Blount County. We've trained personally over 500 officers with the fact of the Invictus symbol. Okay. So they're aware when they see this decal on the back window, when they see it on a hat, when they see this solo symbol, they have a different protocol on how they respond to a veteran with post-traumatic stress. I've got 13 case studies from law enforcement officers calling me specifically saying, this is what happened. And this is how it, you know, thank you for the training. I've had officers call me and say, I wish I would have paid more attention because I didn't know how to respond. I had been called out. I was called out to one during 4th of July where it was a situation where they were going to have to put the veteran down. He had a firearm. He was belligerent. He was threatening to basically cause damage to the neighborhood because they were shooting off fireworks. They called me, didn't know what to do, and I was 4 miles away. Yeah. And I said, I'm going to come over, talk to the veteran, de-escalated the veteran, actually tucked him into bed, and was able to, he went to the VA, I think, the day later, and went through a 3 months detox program. And but it's those real life things. And the law enforcement officer, we walk out, and he says, if I didn't see it, I wouldn't believe it. Yeah. He said, whatever that is happening, it's working. It's absolutely working. So we've got this amazing training program that was developed, honestly, by the officer that killed my dad. You know, and it comes full circle because now it's not about my dad anymore. Now it's, what about the next family? Mm-hmm. And you know what happened when it happened to my dad? The very next week, there was another Marine in Knoxville, same MO, pacing in front of their house, shot and killed by law enforcement. 2 weeks later, in Blount County, another Marine pacing in front of his house, shot and killed by law enforcement. It happens more than we know. In fact, over 1,000, we estimate 1,080 veterans a year die through suicide by cop. That's listed as homicide. They're not listed as suicides. Oh, okay. So it's not part of that 22 or 44. It's really, that's why it's so escalated. And that's our goal, is we want to use this symbol not as an awareness symbol, but as almost like like you would a handicap symbol.
So you mentioned help, though, and reaching out to you. How exactly do you reach out to you? And who can call? Because only the veteran can call, or is it other people that can call?
No, we get calls. We get calls from a lot from the spouses. Because here's the situation with veterans. This is something that we've learned. Until a veteran wants help, we can't help them. Okay. I get calls all the time. Can you call my husband? Can you talk? And I'll say, I can, but it's never going to help. It doesn't matter how many times we've tried. When we reach out first, they don't receive it. Okay. They have to be at a point where they say, I need help. Yeah. And at that point, yes. We do a lot of events. Last night we had a coffee night. We do a lunch for veterans first Saturday of every month. Coffee night's third Thursday of every month. We do May 24th, we have our Ride to Remember, which is a huge ride that we honor our veterans that have died due to complications of post-traumatic stress.
You say motorcycle ride as well, right?
It's motorcycle and Jeep. It actually is morphed into pretty much everybody.
So make sure we say bike, you know? Like...
Yeah, no, it's not a pedal. These all have motors. We're moving.
Oh, okay? And Jeeps too, though. Okay, yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
It started out 2018. I did my mom wanted to meet me at the cemetery on the anniversary of my dad's passing. Yeah. And I thought, I want to do something for my dad. So I found a point in Maryville, which is at the mall. And it's 22 miles to the Veteran Cemetery. Ah, there you go. And I thought, okay, I'm going to ride 22 miles. Well, the next year, my nephew said, hey, you should put it on Facebook. I'm like, no, this is my time to ride for my dad. Well, he did, and we had 5 riders show up. And I'm like, that's great, thank you. Well, it's morphed into, we had a little over 100 and something last year that showed up. The Jeep community, which is huge supporters of Mission Phoenix, they showed up. Nice. So now we want everyone to just take part in what we're doing. And this year's going to be different because every rider will be carrying an actual name of a veteran that committed suicide. And when we get to the cemetery, we're going to meet around the flagpole, and we're all going to say out their names one by one in remembrance of who they are. Because they're still heroes. You know, people tend to put a black label on it, but it's not. These are all heroes that have gone due to our wars, due to what we've put them in situations. But, you know, when veterans want to reach out, a lot of our activities, they'll come out, I'll speak, and that's how we make a lot of our connections. Yeah. Very few will call the phone number and ask for help, but they will show up and they'll listen, because one of the things is validation, right? Veterans have to validate who you are before they're going to trust you. Okay. So they want to see it. They want to show up to an event. They want to talk. They want to, you know, before they actually open up. And what we do is we call it relational counseling. So we don't sit behind a desk. We don't do the back and forth. We go get a cup of coffee. We start talking about their family. We'll go to their kids' ball games. Sure. We'll interact with them in a sense that we're becoming their friend, because that's what it is. We're relational people. We're created that way. We need to remain that way, and that's the only way we're going to heal. So that a lot of those connections come from that. But yeah, people can reach out to us. missionphoenix.org is our website. We have some resources on there. We're working on more. Because of lack of funding, we don't have the greatest website. So it's not that easy to use. I have to do everything pretty much myself on it. But I'm not focused on that as much as let's get our programs in front of the right people so that we can actually save a life. We're not trying to mask it again. We're trying to go back to the origin. And even though, you know, we're doing this law enforcement is that crisis situation.
Yes, right.
We're doing that now because to me that's personal. You know, that's what affected my dad. But ultimately, we're going back into the homes. We're going back in. We're actually trying to get into the military part of it, where right before they come out, we can actually have a program to bring them into civilian life. Okay. And once we enlist something like that into the actual military, and it's going to take a joint effort. Right. And we're working with the attorney generals, with Tim Burchett, with I have a meeting coming up with the Post Commission. So we're working with people for legislation, for change. We're not just trying to mask an issue. We're actually trying to fix the issue. So
one thing I want to go back to was you mentioned the spouse calling in that way too. I'm sure if the spouse were to call in, I mean, what's the protocol? Because you're not going to be like, hey, your wife called me and said you're acting erratic. How do you react to that? And the children, maybe children too, other family members can call in, not just specifically the spouse.
So one of the things that I tend to do, and it happens a lot, like, and I get dads saying my son, you know, is struggling, or so I get more than just spouses, but family members will call, and my number's out there. I mean, people who want to get a hold of me, it's not hard to find, but they'll call me, and the first thing I say is, are they on Facebook? Yes. Okay. I need you to turn them on to Mission Phoenix first. Get them involved in what we're doing, and then maybe see if they'll send me a friend request. And if they send me a friend request, then I will respond back, hey, thank you for, you know, coming in. Thank you, right. You know, just let you know some of the resources that we have if you're struggling. So we don't project to them exactly what the family member told us. Okay. Yes. If we do that, they will shut down. There's an automatic wall, and if you talk to any veteran out there, especially one that has been in combat, there's a wall that goes up. If you're a veteran and you walk up to a veteran, that wall immediately comes down. Right. It doesn't matter what branch you're in. It doesn't matter if you've been in battle or anything. But the fact that you signed on that dotted line, that you would die for the rest of the country's freedoms, you have been qualified by them to be able to talk to them. Yeah. So when we talk to them, there's a wall, and our first objective is to get that wall down. And the only way we can do that is to let them trust us, to know that we're not the nonprofit that's just going to use their pain for our gain. Yeah. You know, we're there to fix their pain so that then they in turn, like we've got a program called the RISE program. The E in RISE is for empowering. We want that veteran, when they go through the program and they're not fully recovered, because they're going to struggle for the rest of their life, but be to a stable enough position that now they can empower other veterans and get them through the program. So it'll cause a rippling effect. We're not going to fix it by ourselves. Yeah. In fact, my favorite quote It's on all of our documentation. It's even on my emails I put in. It's by Ronald Reagan. He said, "We cannot help everyone, but everyone can help someone." And it's powerful.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is good. Now, my daughter goes to Virginia Tech. She's actually the commander for the Corps Cadets over there. So 1,400 kids. So I got to brag about her a little bit. What do you tell her? Because she'll graduate from Virginia Tech after 4 years and go into the Navy. She's going to join the Navy. But what do you tell her? What do you tell the 18-year-old who's coming out of high school, probably graduating this week, if anything, and they're going in and they're excited they're going to go to boot camp in a couple weeks or in the fall? You know, what do you tell that boy or girl? You know, what do you tell them?
I don't have a lot of advice on what to tell them because I honestly don't know what to expect from them. But my biggest thing for them is, you know, your mental aspect is going to be the key. Meaning you have got to, because the military will break you. And the military is different from, like, say, when my dad was in. Yeah. My dad was a Marine, and in fact, he brought us up like Marines. You know, my father literally put us through the training of, I always say we went through 18 years of boot camp because it was, you know, he would come in, he'd flick the light on and say, "Feet on the floor." And we'd have to jump out of bed immediately or he'd drag us out by our toes. I mean, he was a drill sergeant. And that's how we were brought up. But it's that mental capacity of being able to be broken because they're going to break you down, but to still remain stable, if that makes sense. Yeah. I deal with a lot of military that are still active military that are really close to me. And I see their continual mental struggle. And a lot of times the mental is harder than the physical is because you have to, and for civilian, it's so difficult to understand. I don't think we ever will truly understand how hard it is to go from that rapid response, continual adrenaline, that it's almost like you're skydiving for eternity. Like you just have this adrenaline always going, but then all of a sudden now you're sitting in a board meeting and it's quiet and people are taking their time with things and you're just like, hurry up. I just gotta, that whole mental capacity or even the ability to be able to switch back and forth, I think is the hardest thing for both military and veterans to have to deal with. And then they come back into civilian life and that's their biggest struggle is I just want to, I could tell you thousands of times I've heard, I just want to be back. And when you think about, they would rather be in a situation where bullets are flying than they would to be sitting in traffic. I mean, that's the mentality. And we don't understand that as civilians. We will never grasp that. Never grasp that. So I would say the biggest thing is prepare your mind to stay strong.
Good. Closing comments. What's next for Mission Phoenix? How can they reach you? I mean, just anything we missed we didn't cover.
We do have the Invictus Initiative, invictusinitiative.com. If you want to know more about what we're doing, there's some information, not all the information, because a lot of it is still being in the works for legislation. But that's a big thing is the invictusinitiative.com, missionphoenix.org. You can find more about our website. But we do, like I said, our events are important. And not just for veterans, for civilians. Like we want civilians to show up at our events because that integration back into civilian life is critical. And if we don't get involved as civilians, they're never going to heal properly. We also have one of our other programs that we're developing now is our Valor Safe program. And Valor Safe is a program that what we're trying to do, we're working on certification, is to be able to go into companies and train their employees on how to deal with a veteran that has post-traumatic stress, how to look for the signs, how to read the body language, how to de-escalate a situation that could occur in a job situation. And if you look through the news, a lot of times you'll see those situations. We had one in the post office some years back. Where if people understood what was happening, I truly believe that we as civilians can learn to de-escalate. So our Valor Safe program basically will go into the organization, train at least 75% of the company on this. It's about a 3-hour program. And then they will get a Valor Safe decal for their windows so that a veteran that is struggling, or even law enforcement, because we have extended to law enforcement, because law enforcement honestly is going through similar things as veterans because they're having to do acts that are unnatural or immoral to the mental state. So it'll be a safe place basically for veterans and law enforcement to come into where people are trained to deal with it. And I think as we do that, the more companies, the more organizations and shops that we can get into that program, the safer our entire community will be. Because now a veteran or law enforcement officer, if they're struggling, they know, I just need to get a cup of coffee over here real quick. And that barista will be able to say, hey, listen, what's going on? Let me talk to you. You know, so if we can all become the solution, then we'll eliminate the problem. And again, that's one of our bigger ones that we're developing or that we're working on.
That's great. So they can reach you by your website.
Yep.
Phone number. I'll put that all in the comments and different things around the screen here. But man, it's so powerful. And again, just the research, the brief research I did in this and what I personally know, the deeper and deeper you get about how much we need to take care of this and how much we need to actually get the word out there to let people know, hey, you're safe, you're okay, the transition needs to work, you know, and save those lives. So, yeah. Josh, thanks for putting this together for Mission Phoenix. I mean, just it is amazing. I think you're doing a great job. Well, I'm excited for you, and I hope we get the word out more. So
I appreciate it, and thanks for your time. And the more we can talk about it, the more people understand, I think we can start solving some problems. So.
Very good, Josh.
Thank you, brother.
Good.
I appreciate
it. All right,
it.
this is Truth Between Lines.
Between the lines, oh, yeah. Blue, what they hide, what they write, who decides? We dig deep, cut